I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but for most of my life, other people's emotions were extremely contagious. As an untrained empath, I could pick up other people's emotions as easily as I could pick up the common cold. Hey, I'm so glad I caught you home. How you doing? Me? Me? I don't know. Life actually really sucks right now. It's really awful and dark and bleak. In fact, I think today is like the perfect day for me to write my eulogy. Okay, that was a bit of an exaggeration, but you guys understand what I'm trying to say. As an untrained empath, not only was it difficult for me to discern where somebody else's personality or their energy ended and where mine began, but on top of that, when it came to saying no, to listening to myself and to caring about my needs, there was this underlying sense of fear of what that said about me. If I said no, if I listened to myself, if I cared about what I needed. It's almost like at those moments where I was faced with a choice of saying yes to something I didn't want to do, which made someone else happy and me miserable, or saying no to them and making myself happy, there was this voice inside of my head that controlled exactly how I was going to respond. It was so powerful and so overwhelming. It sounded something like this. I am so excited. I just ended a 9-hour workday. That's not the exciting part. But I'm going to take the longest, best, hottest bubble bath with some candles and some music and just give myself some much needed me time. Hey, what's up? What are you doing here? I came through your door without knocking. So remember that party I told you about? No. If I didn't tell you, you can totally come. Seriously. But here's the deal. I have everyone coming over and I need my 5-bedroom, 5-bath apartment cleaned. So I thought you could help me because you're such an awesome friend. So can you please help me? I can't say no. I want to say no, but I can't. She's going to think I'm selfish. No. She's going to hate me. If I say no, she's never going to talk to me again. You're allowed. It's like this feeling inside of me. It hurts, the thought to say no. And yet I want to say no. I need some downtime, but I can't seem to be able to just tell her, let her know. She's going to get mad. I hate when people are mad. When people get mad at me, if I say no, I just can't take it. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to respond. I don't know what to say. This is awful. I can't do this. Let's do it. The interesting thing about those perceptions that were governing my mind, which ultimately were governing my actions and my feelings, the interesting thing is that none of those feelings, none of those perceptions were based on the adult that I am now. After all, I know as an adult logically that I can say no, I can care about myself, my needs are important, I can rationalize with myself that that's normal. Everyone says no every now and then, especially if saying yes is going to be harmful or negative to them in a certain way. Everyone does that. Logically, my brain could do that as the person I am now. But when I was faced with those situations that allowed me to prove that I logically understood that and my actions could show that that was my reality, that's when logic got tossed out the window. And that's because saying no at that moment had nothing to do with what was going on in my immediate life. And it had everything to do with what happened when I said no as a child. For example, if you were raised in a home environment where you were criticized, yelled at, ignored, punished, or made to feel shame if you ever spoke up for yourself, if you ever took into consideration your needs, or if you ever said no to something, even when you had logical reason to say no, and you were met with those behaviors, then you learned that saying no was dangerous. In fact, it was a life and death danger. Think about it. As a 3 and a 4-year-old, you need your caregivers. You need your parents for survival. So if saying no brought about anger, rejection, abandonment, neglect from your caregivers, as a 3, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, you can't survive without your caregivers. You needed them. So what could you survive without? You could survive without thinking of yourself. You could survive without standing up for yourself. You could survive without ever saying no. You wouldn't be happy. It's not really a quality life, but it's survival. And at that moment, your survival instincts kicked in. So from a very young age, our mind begins to associate saying no with abandonment, which felt like a life or death situation. It's not difficult to understand. Think about Pavlov's dogs. When Pavlov rang the bell every time he gave them food, eventually at the sound of a bell, the dogs would automatically produce saliva, and that association with eating would kick in. Their body would respond as if it was getting ready to eat. It was conditioned. It's the same thing with saying no. As children, we were conditioned to respond negatively. That was an absolute nightmare, the consequences of saying no, so we learn to avoid it at all costs. That's why when we're in these situations as adults, our logical mind makes sense of it, but that internal dialogue kicks in. And that internal dialogue, that's your programming. That's the programming that's in your subconscious mind. Our conscious mind is logical. It says, I'm allowed to say no. Of course I'm allowed to say no. I'm allowed to care about myself. But what we don't realize is that it's our subconscious mind, our programming, that's running the show. After all, our subconscious mind governs 95% of our actions and our thoughts. So in order to overcome fear of saying no, guilt with saying no, it's not just a matter of putting it into practice, but it's actually a matter of changing that programming. One of the first things to realize is that when you are overcome with emotions that don't make sense, where your logical mind is saying to do one thing and you still can't seem to be able to do it because there's something inside of you that won't let you, then it's most likely an emotional flashback, what you're going through. And if you don't know what emotional flashbacks are, please check out Complex PTSD by Pete Walker, who in Chapter 8 describes what they are as well as how to overcome them. He has 13 steps with overcoming them. What it says there, and I want to quote right from the book, it says that emotional flashbacks are intensely disturbing regressions to the overwhelming feeling states of your childhood abandonment. When you are stuck in a flashback, fear, shame, and or depression can dominate your experience. You feel little, fragile, and helpless. Everything feels too hard. Being seen feels excruciatingly vulnerable. In the worst flashbacks, an apocalypse feels like it will imminently be upon you. And when you're trapped in a flashback, you're actually reliving the worst emotional times of your childhood. Everything feels overwhelming and confusing, especially because there are rarely any visual components to a CPTSD flashback. Having this information is like the piece of the puzzle that's missing in order to understand why it's so hard. So now that you know that it's possibly an emotional flashback, what can you do about it? Once again, you can check out Pete Walker's 13 steps that can help you to get through an emotional flashback. I come up with my own 3 because as a New Yorker, everything kind of needs to be fast, and 13 just was too much for me. But make sure you do what's good for you. But I'm going to tell you what helped me, okay? So the first thing that helped me was to recognize the fact that I was possibly in an emotional flashback. The second step is to make sense as to why you would be having an emotional flashback. And the third step is to bring yourself back to the person you are at that moment, the adult that you are at that moment. That's part of being able to overcome emotional flashbacks. When I learned this, that was like huge. It was a game changer on my healing journey. Let me know if you've ever done this. Comment below. Let me know how it goes if you're beginning to try this. And remember, consistency is key. The more you practice this skill, the more you put into practice these tools, the faster you're going to overcome these emotional flashbacks that are causing you to show up as your child self instead of the adult that you are today.